What I'd like to do before we go there this morning is talk about this travel news. Portugal has issued its own travel advice as the government when traveling to the United States. Now, the, the, these are those lightning rod issues, are they not, that we've talked about before? And when I heard that I think Germany and the UK had issued travel guidance about going to the US, it's like, hold on a minute. Is this just because there's a change in government and administration, or is it truly sinister? And I know a lot of people fear that it is truly sinister, but let's work our way through. It's sinister. I'm getting a nod in the room that it's sinister. Let's find out. I just because I think there are some seriously controversial things happening. There's no question about that, is there? But we also, I think, need to be a little bit careful, perhaps, to not get carried away with some of the reporting as well. But that's an easy thing to say in this day and age of social media and news reporting. As the media landscape, it's something extraordinary happening, and Marco might want to comment about that later on as well, about the media landscape. There was a time when you switched on your TV, and what you were told, you believed. That's changed a little bit, I think, in the last few years. So let's see what we can do when it comes to understanding the Portuguese government issue and the guidance set out for Portuguese citizens when traveling to the United States, which of course would include you if you're now resident here in Portugal and you want to know how it's going to be when you arrive in the US. And I'm reading a news item from yesterday from the Portugal News. Portugal has joined the list of European countries that have updated their recommendations for travelers to the United States with specific warnings about the fact that a visa does not grant automatic entry. Now, this is one of those items or points where sometimes you have to ask, was that not always the case? I imagine whenever anybody arrived in the United States, the border force had the last word on whether they were allowed in or not. And if that was always the case, then it might be a little bit disingenuous to suggest that your visa's not your visa anymore. But we'll see. We'll read more of this article here and see what's going on. Because I think some of these changes that are happening in the United States were always the case. It's just that they've been brought into a different light in the recent changes in the political administration. Let's refer to it as that. On the Portuguese Communities portal from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So this is practical guidance for you if you are traveling to the United States, where we know Bobby O'Reilly is at the moment. He might be tuned in this morning. Give us a shout out, Bobby, if you're still up in the United States or you've got up really early. It is stated that for citizens who identify with a non-binary gender, for example, the recommendation from the North American authorities is that they must fill out the forms and make declarations upon arrival with the gender with which they were identified at birth. The travel advice section of the portal reminds you that entry and stay under the visa waiver program is limited to business and tourism purposes and to a maximum duration of 90 days, which it is, of course, when you come to Portugal. I think it's a very similar situation in operation, and people will ask you. I remember arriving in Australia and being asked, business or pleasure? And I think it's the same wherever you go, isn't it, as that formality as you arrive to open up the conversation with the border force. And 90 days, of course, which is how long a tourist visa would last if you were coming into Portugal as well. So maximum duration of 90 days, as well as prior obtaining of the electronic travel authorization. Now, some of you who have been to the United States recently might like to comment on that as well. Oh, there's an unwelcome advert popping up on my... I downloaded a pop-up blocker the other day, which is very interesting because what happens when you download a pop-up blocker is the pop-up blocker keeps popping up and asking you if you want to upgrade. So I got rid of the pop-up blocker because it kept popping up. Right, please note that possession of an ESTA, that is the electronic travel authorization, or a visa does not constitute an automatic right of entry into the United States. The final decision is always made by the border agent upon arrival in the United States, the text reads. And that's one of those things that I'm sure was always true. It's probably true when you're coming into Portugal, going to the UK. They always have I don't think you can demand entry just because you filled in the paperwork. I imagine the last word is with the authority on the border, on the physical border there as you arrive. To avoid misunderstandings in communication, it is recommended that travellers carry proof of return travel. That would be wise, wouldn't it? I think that does arouse suspicion if you go into the United States and you haven't got a return ticket, and probably anywhere, many other countries as well, and avoid making false statements about the purposes of their stay. That also, I suspect, is timeless advice for travellers. Don't make false statements about the purpose of your visit. It's also recommended that anyone entering through ports or airports in the United States avoid crossing land borders with Canada and Mexico if they intend to leave the United States later, as their re-entry may be questioned. That's interesting. I remember when I was staying in California, in LA, 25 years ago approximately, and popped to, as you do when you're a tourist and you leave California and you go to Mexico to go to Tijuana for a few hours. And what happened was I got pulled by a Mexican cop on a bike for running a stop line. I didn't know about that in the UK. We sorted it out. There was an on-the-spot administration matter to deal with, which involved some cash. And I have to tell you, I had never been so glad. I almost got out of the car on the way back into California after being kind of virtually roughed up with suggestions of if I didn't sort it out on the spot with the Mexican cop, I might end up in jail, which was enough to bring me into the present moment and figure out what was going on. But that got all sorted out, and then I returned to the Californian border or the American border. And I wanted to get out of the ground and I get out of the car and kiss the tarmac. I was so pleased to be back. And I was confronted by an American border agent saying, have you got any nuclear weapons on board? To which I replied, like straight-faced and shocked, no. And he said, I'm just kidding, obviously. And that was a great moment. And I've got to tell you, I was so glad to be back in the United States. However, in this day and age, if you make your way across the border to Canada and Mexico, you have to be careful doing that at the moment by the sound of it. Yes, so to avoid misunderstandings in communication, carry your return travel documents and don't make false statements. That's just obvious, isn't it? Portuguese citizens with a machine-readable passport who present the AI migration route, who present proof of means of subsistence and information about accommodation are not required to obtain a visa for a stay of less than 90 days. According to the Portugal news here. So that's important. Portuguese citizens with a machine-readable passport who present proof of means of subsistence. I don't know what those means are or what the proof might look like. It doesn't say here. And information about accommodation are not required to obtain a visa for a stay of less than 90 days. So I guess that's your hotel reservation, is it not? Or if you're staying with relatives, similar. Other European countries have updated their warnings. And this is where my curiosity was first aroused about this. I think it was Pete who mentioned to us that, yeah, the UK is warning people about traveling into the US. So let's find out more about that, particularly those related to gender identity, following cases of detained tourists and concerns about the tightening of visa policies and immigration controls in the United States. At least Germany, the UK, France, Denmark, Finland, and Norway have changed their recommendations, presenting notes similar to those of the Portuguese portal in relation to ESTA. Norway has stated that only two genders, male or female, are included in a visa application or ESTA form, since the US authorities only recognize the sex that a person had at birth following the decree signed on the matter by President Donald Trump on his first day in office. Denmark has advised citizens who have changed their gender on their passport or who are registered as X or indeterminate to contact the US Embassy before traveling so that they can be advised on how to proceed. So that's what you need to do if you find yourself in that situation. Germany added that criminal records in the US, false information about the purpose of the stay or exceeding the minimum duration of stay could lead to arrest, detention, and deportation. Again, I'm sure that's always been the case. However, it might be heightened at the moment. If you've got a criminal record there, and if you tell Porky Pies on arrival and you exceed your minimum duration, that could get you into trouble. I'm sure that was always the case, but yeah, as I say, that's probably been amplified a little bit just recently. The Portuguese website states that violation of these conditions related to the visa waiver, namely providing false statements and exceeding the legal period of stay in the country, may result in the detention and deportation of any citizen by the American immigration authorities. Bizarre, really, because if I suppose the advice is, if it was your intention to arrive in America and tell lies, you might find yourself in trouble. Not really a newsflash. I don't think. But anyway, we'll come back to that. Marco may have something to share on that, as well as celebrating, as I said, the second anniversary of being here in San Martino de Porto. He's our special guest this morning and talking about the wonderful event that's happening. You may have seen I've had a few conversations with Gary Coulton. He of the Maverick Mind, and he'll be calling in to chat with us as well briefly, because he's coming to Portugal and he'll be here this Saturday enjoying the bay that I'm looking out over this morning. Beach Cam Man will be mobilizing soon so that you can look at the beach and enjoy San Martino de Porto this morning whilst I have my conversation with Marco and with you. Let's see what you're saying this morning. Mel says, absolutely. Countries have regularly cancelled valid visas with no notice. Many speakers suddenly unable to enter countries. Djokovic, a prime example from Australia. Yes, that's right.